All right, so as we're letting everyone in, I will welcome everyone, and we'll get started in a couple of minutes as we let more guests in. Please settle in. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we hope that um, today a really great um, event. Thank you all. All right, so as we're letting everyone in, I will all right. We will give one more minute as people continue to come in.
Juanita, I resent the link to John at Cardinal Spellman. I'm just going to call him back now and make sure that he got it.
Okay, got it.
Wonderful news. I just let him in, so we're good.
All right, great.
And as I mentioned, he is sharing his big screen at Cardinal Spellman. So although you just see one link on the participants, there's approximately 25 participants connected to that one link through Cardinal Spellman.
Okay, wonderful. So everyone at Cardinal Spellman, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. All right, well, I will get started as we continue to let people in. I will welcome you all. We're so excited to welcome you to our first ever Financial Literacy Forum. As we close out Financial Literacy Month, we are proud to use this platform to forward the message that financial literacy is to be celebrated every day, not just during April. So thank you all for joining us today. Before we move forward, please note that all of our slides are being recorded. We're also live on YouTube. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll get to them as we proceed through the sessions. If you have technical difficulties, please let us know and we will try to help you as we go through. So we want to thank today our sponsors, JPMorgan Chase and Company, and you'll hear a little bit more about them in a second. My Money Workshop's mission is to educate both teens and adults to manage their finances wisely and make a lifetime of informed decisions. We emphasize the importance of wise and secure financial decision-making, and we, as a financial literacy organization, we make it our duty to provide participants with educated and actionable steps for a brighter tomorrow. My Money Workshop strives to demonstrate to each of our participants that there is power in knowledge. Since our inception, My Money Workshop has partnered with public and private high schools, colleges, universities, specialty schools, and community-based organizations to deliver customized financial literacy programs in the New York tri-state area. Each of our seminars included in our programs is tailored to the school or agency's participants to ensure that each can learn new methods or strategies that can benefit them in their financial journey. I'll ask that everyone please mute themselves if you can as I get through these next few slides. To date, we have provided over 20,000 participants with the tools and resources they need to make financial decisions that affect them and their families. Our success is due in part to our partnership and the support of our donors and instructors who give so much of their time to our participants. Today's speakers will shed light on the very real issues that individuals both young and old are experiencing and Barb. While I We want to thank our excellent speakers and JPMorgan Chase, our presenting sponsor, for dedicating their time and effort to this forum. Today, we celebrate the impact that with all our partners, we have affected. We also spotlight the role that financial literacy plays in ensuring the wellness of our communities. However, we know that financial wellness and financial freedom cannot be achieved if we do not address poverty, equity, and access to resources like ours. In a few minutes, you will hear from Nichol King about JPMorgan Chase's path forward and how they plan to address the existing racial wealth gap in the US. Jessica Reinman of 914 Cares will discuss 914 Cares Poverty Symposium, as well as the hurdles that families on a local level face on the path to economic success. Our Women's Economic Empowerment panel, featuring our partners from the Women's Prison Association and the Kota Alliance, plus several of our instructors, will highlight the importance of financial education and programming for women. Kara Smith of South Bronx Rising Together will address the results of their survey of Bronx parents and individuals during the pandemic, plus what we can do to move forward in the South Bronx. Winston Berkman-Breen from the New York State Department of Financial Services will discuss the student loans and student loans consumer protections. And finally, John Campos and Albert Paez of ComSci High will discuss the addition of a new youth financial wellness program in their school. We'll also hear from our board co-president and one of our participants. What I would like you, before I continue to present our morning speaker, what I would like you to take away from today is awareness. Keep in mind that everyone has different relationships to money. I want you to go to your child's school and ask what type of financial education they provide for their children. How are they ensuring that all children are supported? I want you to have frank conversations about money at home. I know parents understandably don't want their children to carry the same worries they have about money. We wait until our children are graduating college to speak to them about the realities of adulthood, but we must start early so that one day My Money Workshop isn't needed. Let's all work together to ensure that our communities are empowered to succeed. With that in mind, I want to celebrate our partners' efforts to further the financial literacy of our communities, especially our presenting sponsor, JPMorgan Chase. They have put their funds to work in this field. JPMorgan Chase has been a My Money Workshop volunteer since 2019 through their Good Works program. They have committed to helping us reach our goal of increasing our instructors and reaching more participants. Please join me in welcoming Nichol King, Chase's community manager.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Janeda. I am absolutely delighted to be here this morning. Can everyone hear me? Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can see you fully, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, perfect. So yes, thank you so much for the warm introduction. I'm really delighted to be here with you guys this morning. As Janeda mentioned, my name is Nichol King, and I am JPMorgan Chase's first ever community manager located here in Harlem, New York. About 18 months ago, the firm decided to take a look at how we support communities in which we serve, and Harlem being the first community. So what we did was we had a series of roundtable conversations with community members, local businesses, residents, elected officials, and quite frankly asked the community, how can JP Morgan Chase support the community in very challenging times? And mind you, this was pre-pandemic. So what we heard, and we heard very loud and clear, the community said they needed help around 3 areas. We heard loud and clear. The first thing was we needed to help local small businesses learn how to operationalize their business in the growing economy. Then we heard from our community partners like My Money Workshop that meeting space was a premium. So if we can help our nonprofit organizations have community space to meet their participants as well as to host leadership offsites, that would be extremely helpful. And last but certainly not least, the community residents said that they wanted a place where they can come and learn the basics of financial education, how to create a budget, how to begin to save for the unexpected, how to manage credit wisely. So we took all of that feedback and created the bank's first ever community manager role, but also the community branch. So I welcome everyone on the call to definitely come take a look at the space. It's absolutely beautiful. But what is so special about the branch is that it is a traditional branch, but it also has a community engagement component in which I oversee. So prior to the pandemic, we would host in-person workshops, which were extremely, extremely successful. But of course, the pandemic happened, unfortunately, and we've been able to pivot and do the workshops virtually. So this is why the collaboration with My Money Workshop is so important to JP Morgan Chase to really help us advance the work that we do in communities in which we serve. In October of 2020, we announced a $30 billion commitment to advance racial equity. And that commitment is going to really show up in a few different ways. One, we're looking to promote and expand affordable housing and home ownership in underserved communities. Next, we're looking to grow Black and Latinx businesses in underserved communities. And of course, looking to improve financial health. Now, the work that I do in Harlem has really, really helped the community and move the needle with financial education. And we're super, super, super delighted that we will be opening 16 additional community branches across the country. And while I was the first, I will no longer be the only. We're also investing in 150 more community managers across the country to advance the work that we're doing. So I want to thank you so much, My Money Workshop, for allowing JP Morgan Chase to be a part of this amazing forum, because the work that you guys do is so aligned in our mission of really advancing the racial equity divide.
Thank you, and congratulations for this initiative. We have been following JP Morgan's messaging throughout, since this was announced, and so we are just so thankful for your generosity and for how connecting with My Money Workshop, because there is definitely a lot of synergy in what we're both, all of us are trying to do. Before we continue talking a little bit about Chase and all of your initiatives, I want people to hear a little bit about your journey. Why is financial wellness important to you?
Yeah, so I come to this work with a deep-seated passion because of my own story. So I was raised in a single family household, and we really didn't have money conversations. My mother was an amazing mother. She was a nurse, and she took care of her 4 kids. But I mean, she had a lot of money stresses and pressures being a single mother. So as a result, we didn't have those conversations. So those pressures really transferred down to me as a young adult. So I didn't have very good money management skills myself. I used to do what they call rob Peter to pay Paul, live paycheck to paycheck, keep, buy shoes every weekend to keep up with the Joneses. So I didn't come from a place where financial education was even a topic at my dinner table. So when I became a college student, that's when I realized the light bulb went off and I said, you know what, I have to do better. If I want to change the narrative for my own family, I need to really get serious about my finances. So when I think about 40% of Americans do not have at least $400 set aside in a savings account for the unexpected, those numbers are frightening. And when you talk about Black and Latinx communities, that percentage is even higher. So my goal and my mission in the work that I do is really to help individuals start where they're at, right? We can't change, right, the money decisions that we've made in the past, but every journey begins with the first step. And I truly believe in my whole heart that it doesn't matter where you're at on the journey, you can definitely change the narrative and advance your own financial health for yourself and your families.
Agreed. You're preaching to the choir, definitely, on this platform. But you're so right. Where a lot of us don't learn, those sort of basic things. And as I said earlier, we wait until we graduate college to try to figure out how to live on, as adults, and what does that even mean, right? Managing debt and all that, all those things. So it's amazing that people like us have landed where we are, because I can definitely see similarities in how I grew up, and even though my background is as an immigrant, coming in, learning how this world works, we definitely have similarities in our upbringing. So tell me, moving on, tell me a little bit more about how Chase has responded to the community during the pandemic.
Yeah, great question. So we have a space, well, a few community spaces within the branch, and we also have an innovation lab. And what happened was, as a result of the pandemic, my colleagues that work in the innovation lab began to work from home. So we had this big, amazing space that was not being used. So we went to the community and had a listening session and said, how can we really support during these very, very challenging times of the pandemic? So what we learned is that 46% of the Harlem community does not have access to Wi-Fi or broadband. So what we did was we repurposed the Innovation Lab and turned it into a free Wi-Fi hotspot for community residents. So from the hours of 9 to 5, anyone from the community can come into the space and be safely socially distanced and use our Wi-Fi. And for those community residents that don't have devices, we actually even have limited devices that we can lend them to use. And it has been really, really successful because as you know, or I'm sure, could imagine, right, with everyone working from home, with parents having to homeschool their children, right, the access is very limited. So the community has responded very well to that. And I look at that example and I'm very proud of it because that's another example really of how we're able to be agile and respond to the community needs.
Yeah, and I think access, that's such it's a giant hurdle that a lot of people have to get by. We have people who, we talk about the national financial literacy standards. One of the things that it requires is that students leave classes understanding how to open up a bank account. But what we don't realize is that today teens need their parents to open up an account. And if that parent is undocumented, that parent doesn't have the necessary records to open an account for themselves, let alone their child. So what are we telling a child in a classroom that, this is the way, this is the path forward, but you can't take advantage of that. So that access piece is so great that you're addressing that, from the Wi-Fi aspect, but it's such a larger conversation across the board. And if anyone in the audience today does have any questions as we continue asking, as speaking with Nichol, please do share them in the chat and we'll get them to Nichol. But yeah, I feel like that is the next big thing as we continue to go through the pandemic, is how do we have parents that are at home that have one device homes? How do we make it available, or other devices or other access to resources like ours and yours possible?
Yeah, digital access and closing the digital divide is another hurdle, right? That I really lean in and work with my community partners to help, right, residents of the community, because it is, the pandemic has definitely taught us and shown us that, the internet and Wi-Fi, it's not a nice to have, it's actually a must have, right? When you think about access. Another thing that we did during the pandemic, which was also again very, very, very inspiring, is that we help local small businesses. So here in Harlem, there is a lot of restaurants, and we know that the restaurants were really, really hit hard as a result of the pandemic. So what we did is, it was through a partnership that we have with the Madison Square Garden. We did a campaign called Hometown Heroes, and we hired the local restaurants to actually deliver food to frontline workers. So that was a way for us to really activate corporate dollars back into the community and really help the restaurants that were really seeing some challenging times as a result of the pandemic.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. As we continue on, can you tell me what people can take away from today? What they can do to further financial literacy in their own communities?
Yeah. So, first, the fact that the My Money Workshop is having this forum is wonderful, right? These conversations need to constantly be had, not just, as you mentioned at the onset, in the month of April, to really move the needle and to continue to advance financial health, and particularly personal finance, is that we have to talk about it. We have to collaborate with each other, right? And really double down in communities through collaborations, like the one that Chase has with My Money Workshop. As I mentioned, and when I think about my upbringing, it was actually taboo to talk about money. It was looked at that it was rude. You never asked someone how much money do they make. You never asked them how much you paid for a pair of shoes. It was just deemed tacky, right? So I think what JPMorgan Chase is doing and what others can do is really to continue to demystify the financial conversations and to have them. That's one. I think also really stay aligned with JPMorgan Chase. As I mentioned, the work that I started here in Harlem is scaling right across the country, and we're always looking for active partners that have synergies in the space and to work with us, right? Because we do understand that collaborations are very powerful. And when you collaborate with organizations like the My Money Workshop, you really double your impact. So, stay connected to your organizations and your community, have those conversations about money, and really look where we're expanding and look for ways to partner with JPMorgan Chase.
Great, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And so can you maybe talk a little bit more about what this rollout with Chase is going to look like across, definitely at the local level, but on a
Large
large
scale?
national scale?
Yeah, sure. So my role as community manager is I am pretty much the bridge between the community and the firm. So I look for community partners to activate all the firm's resources here in Harlem. And that's what my colleagues are going to do across the country. What's really important to us and what our mandate is, as I mentioned, is really closing or advancing the racial wealth gap. And we're going to do that a few ways. Financial health is first and foremost, right? Having those budgeting workshops, teaching the community how to manage their money wisely, collaborating with small businesses, right, to give them visibility and marketing opportunities, investing in affordable housing. We know in urban cities, affordable housing continues to be a challenge. So we're investing in those areas as well. So I think it's, again, the work is, we're just scratching the surface. And it really takes business, community, nonprofits to really get this work done and continue to move the needle.
Wonderful. And before we open it up to questions from the audience, can you tell us how people can stay connected with Chase throughout this process?
Yeah, so certainly our website, jpmorganchase.com. You can look at our model of impact. You can learn more about the Path Forward commitment. You can learn about the cities in which the community branches and spaces are opening up across the country. And certainly, but not least, you can stay connected by contacting me.
Great, thank you so much. And one of the things that we didn't mention earlier is, well, I touched on it briefly, that Chase has been a volunteer sponsor for My Money Workshop. My Money Workshop has a initiative to increase our instructors to 100 by 2023. We're well on the way there, and JPMorgan Chase, I see a couple of JPMorgan Chase employees in the audience today. And we're just so thankful to you all for helping us to grow this this mission in this way by sponsoring your employees to become My Money Workshop instructors. It's made a real difference in what we can do as an organization. So I want to, I'm sure from the rest of our board and staff, I just thank you and JPMorgan Chase for your support of the forum today and of our My Money Workshop throughout the year.
Thank you so much. As I said at the onset, it's really a delight and a joy to be a part of this forum, because again, it personally resonates, but it also certainly resonates with the firm's mission.
Wonderful. Does anyone have any questions for Nichol? I know everybody's muted, but you can raise your hand and I can unmute you. Okay, Renee, I'm gonna unmute you. All right, Renee, you have a question?
Hi, good morning. Yes. So my mom, she has a Chase card, and on Thursday we have an appointment so she can make me an authorized user on her credit card so that hopefully I can increase my credit. So I have a Chase account too. Do you think after I'm an authorized user on her credit card for a while that I'll be likely to get a credit card myself?
So Renee, thank you for your question. So unfortunately that I can't answer that question. What I definitely encourage you to do, which it sounds like you're doing anyway, is that you're going to meet with a banker on Thursday. And a banker will be able to review all of your options for you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Renee. Anyone else? Shweta.
Shweta, you're on mute.
Yeah. Hi, thanks, Menschel. Nichol, just wanted to take a moment and thank you for so many things, but this reminder that it's never too late, and no matter where people come from, they can take care of their financial future. And I hope whoever is in the audience today and continues to watch this, because Janita is streaming this live on YouTube, I hope they take this message away, because very often people, and we have people reach out to us, to Janita, Marisol, and I, like, but I haven't. And like, there's no need to be panicky. You can start from where you are. And I really appreciate you reiterating that through your personal story. So thank you for the work that you do. And thank you for personalizing it on a level where we could relate to it so deeply.
My pleasure. Yeah, I think that is, and I continue to say that message. It really isn't, it's never too late, and we, like I said, we all come to our financial journeys from different places, and we can all do it. We can definitely all do it. I mean, I'm a testament, I'm still a work in progress, but I'm certainly not where I was a year or even 2 years ago on my journey.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have a comment from Doug. Wonderful presentation. Thanks, Nichol, for participating in what is such an important topic. We'll ask one more time if anyone has a question. I think Nichol. Oh, Rob, you have a question. Go ahead.
Nichol, hi. On behalf of My Money Workshop and the board, we want to thank you. And I would also like to tell everybody that we're out there speaking to a lot of people, other banks, financial institutions, but Chase has really stepped up, and they are walking the walk and talking the talk. And your initiatives are going to help millions of people across the country. And we appreciate it, and we appreciate being your partner and on this journey, and love your story. And it makes it more real for everybody to understand that they can do it too. And look at what you've accomplished. So congratulations to you, and thank you again to JPMorgan Chase.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. The work that My Money Workshop does to really advance financial wellness is definitely a mission of the firms. So we're happy to be partners. I do see a comment in the chat. Chase is just starting to open branches in the DMV area, looking to see how they are supporting the community too. Yes, we are. DC, Maryland, and Virginia is what we call an expansion market. So we are opening branches there. And the good news is that you will have a community manager in the DMV area as well. So that is another area where a community manager will be able to support the community.
Wonderful. I love that question, because I think that's one of the silver linings of the pandemic. We've been able to reach a wider set of individuals, not just in the tri-state area, but really across the US this year. And we will be seeing those situations where partnerships can expand in these other localities. So it's great to see that question. All right, before we close out with Nichol, is there any last things that you want to share or say before we close out?
I just thank the My Money Workshop for having this forum. It's a much needed discussion, and definitely stay connected to the initiatives at JPMorgan Chase. I believe you put my LinkedIn or my email. So if anyone has any additional follow-up questions, you want to learn about collaborating with the firm, you can definitely reach out to me and stay connected.
Great. Yep, and we'll put that in the chat in a little while if it hasn't already been done. Well, thank you again. We really appreciate your time this morning. We are a little ahead, so I'm going to take one pause and share a brief video with you all. Give me 1 second. We at My Money Workshop start our presentations with the importance of financial goal setting. We know that you really can't meet your goals unless you know what those goals are. And one of the activities that we have our participants do is create financial vision boards. So we have a video of or video and audio, excuse the poor video editing skills, but it's a really great audio for you all to hear one of our participants as they talk through their vision for their future. If you bear with me as I share my screen. Please let me know if you don't hear it.
So who would like to share their vision board with us? Who wants to go first? Because hopefully we'll all take a turn.
I'll go if nobody wants to go first.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Sure. I just want to say that I didn't get a chance to really like cut photos out, so I kind of just used words and drew pictures on my own.
Yeah.
I'm not the best artist, so. So this is my vision board. I don't know how well you can see it, but there's a couple things on there. And I guess I'll start in the center, which is my house, because that's what I really want most and I feel need most to feel fulfilled and secure in life. So I have a place for my daughter and I to live and grow in together. So yeah, so that's why that's in the middle. And then I guess I'll start on the top then, where I wrote strict budget, because I can admit that I have a shopping problem, which is why over here there is the word shopping crossed out, because I need to shop less and focus more on my budgeting, because I know that I overspend. So I'll go down here where there's these three little blocks, which are supposed to be buildings for school. So I wrote college and BS and MSW because I'm going back to school this fall. I do have some college credits, but I never obtained my degree. So I would really like to get my degree in social work and my master's of social work, so that way I can further my career and gain more money, which will provide me with security. And I can, you know, invest more money. I do want to start investing now because I have a little bit in savings, but I want to be able to invest more long-term in the hopes of gaining more. And, you know, be able to use that for extras in life, like finally, you know, getting myself a car again and being able to travel, because I would like to be able to go on vacations with my daughter. And I mean, I feel like this has all been in my head, you know, and it's all been on my mind for, you know, quite some time now. Even before I even got pregnant, some of it, I just kind of feel like I've always been somebody who always finds a reason why I can't move forward in doing something for some reason, like something takes precedence at the time, or I feel like I'm going to be overwhelmed and I can't do it all at the same time. But you know, since becoming a mother, it's really just given me that serious extra push I needed to say, like, this has to stop and I can do it, because there's so many other people in the world that do it. And there's really like no room for error and like wasted time anymore. Like, you know, I want to be able to give my daughter a fulfilling life. And that's just like my biggest worry, concern, and goal all wrapped in one.
We want to thank Jennifer for sharing her thoughts with us. And those are the stories that we hear every day in our classes. We hear people sharing their, articulating their visions after completing the series of programming that we provide. Initially, My Money Workshop started by just doing one-off classes at colleges. And today we provide hundreds of programs across the tri-state with these series that range from 2 parts, 3 parts, 6 parts to a full year long program, and people ultimately can begin to create these vision boards, these visions for themselves. And I want to thank you all for letting us share that with you, and for joining us today so that we can continue this conversation. I think we have our next speaker here, and while we get her set up, I will we'll take a brief couple of minutes. Hi, Jessica, I see you. We will take a couple of minutes so that we can get her set up, and I will get my slides back in order. So bear with us. There we go.
Do you want me to share the slideshow, or are you going to share the slideshow?
Oh, you can share if you're comfortable doing it.
Yeah, that's fine. I just you need to make me the host.
Actually, you should be able to share now.
Okay, let's see. Okay, give me 1 second.
There you go.
Okay. Just I can't really see you at the same time, so let me know when you want me to start.
Okay. You can start whenever. I'm going to unpin myself so that we can only see you. All right. You're all set. You can get started when
Okay, perfect. So thank you so much for having me. My name is Jessica Reinman, and I am the founder and CEO of 914 Cares, which is an organization that focuses on poverty in Westchester County, and specifically collaborating with community partners in individual towns and areas to make sure that each area has specifically what they need. When Janita asked me to speak today, she asked me to focus on 2 main things, which is access and our Westchester Poverty Symposium, which happens every year in January. I think the majority of the program is going to focus on access just because it's such an enormous issue right now. Access for people who are living in under-resourced areas and who have been marginalized for their whole lives is an enormously overreaching issue that we can't cover in 20 minutes. It really impacts every area of a family or an individual's life. But specifically with respect to poverty, access really is a root cause of poverty, and then also is a reason why, unfortunately, many stay in poverty. So I'll also be talking about statistics, which I hope will not shock you, but the majority of the statistics that I talk about when I talk about statistics do shock most people. Specifically statistics in Westchester, but statistics in New York and the United States are quite shocking as well. And then the last thing I'll talk about is collaboration and the success of collaboration and our Westchester Poverty Symposium. So when we talk about access, access and the access to basic necessities really depends on where you live. There's significant differences to access if you live in a city versus a suburb versus a rural area. The main issue with access is transportation. And so I have that as number one, because as far as I'm concerned, transportation affects everything underneath it. And we'll talk briefly about how and why, and if there are any ways to fix it. So when you talk about transportation in a city, you know, I'm just going to focus on New York City because it's the city that we're all most familiar with. Transportation is really easy, right? You can get pretty much anywhere in the 5 boroughs on a subway or a bus. And that provides a lot of access to those in under-resourced communities to get out of the under-resourced communities for work, for shopping, for entertainment, for school, for education for their children, for education for themselves. It really gives an opportunity for movement. And that is a really big issue in the suburbs and rural areas. So in the suburbs, obviously, transportation is significantly different than the city. It's significantly worse, public transportation. And in rural areas, there's almost no public transportation. So I'm going to focus on suburbs because that's my expertise, and specifically on Westchester. I do have a lot of relationships with other similar organizations in other suburbs and small cities, which I'll sort of include as suburbs. And, you know, we talk regularly, and the issues we're going to talk about here today with respect to access really do exist in every similar type community to Westchester. So I'm sure many of you know that transportation in Westchester sucks. There's only busing, and the buses do not run cross-county, meaning that if you live in Peekskill, it's almost impossible to get to Yonkers on public transportation. If you live in Mount Vernon, it's almost impossible to get to Mount Kisco on public transportation. It's not impossible. You could take 3 buses, but it's pretty close to impossible. And what that has done in Westchester is created almost hubs of food insecurity and poverty in individual towns because the residents living there can't get out. So most of them work in some sort of a very close proximity to where they live. And the education where they live is subpar compared to other education in other communities, and they can't get out to get that education. And I don't just mean public education like public schools. I mean after school programs for your children. I mean before school programs for your children. It's just the access to anything outside of your local community is very difficult. And what has happened because of that is that very small nonprofits have sort of developed in every one of these under-resourced communities to help the same problem. So there's a food pantry in almost every under-resourced community. There's some sort of free or low-cost child cost provider in each of these communities. And I can go on, but I only have 20 minutes. So a big issue that we need to talk about as we go back down the list is the federal poverty line. So the federal poverty line is $26,500 for a family of 4. And what that means is you're considered to be living in poverty if your family makes under that or under that amount. There's been a lot of research done specifically by a woman named Amy Glassmeyer, who is a professor at MIT, and she created what she calls the living wage calculator. And what that does is it takes the actual cost of living in each individual community, and it puts in a whole bunch of numbers, which I don't understand, and it comes up with what the actual poverty line is. So in Westchester, the actual poverty line for a family of 4 is $80,000 a year. So there's such a significant difference between what the federal poverty line is and what the actual poverty line should be in Westchester County. And that affects so many things, but most specifically, it affects federal, state, and local funding with respect to childcare, with respect to poverty, with respect to getting how much food stamps you get and how much help you get. So I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So let's just, with respect to access, go down to now bulk purchasing. So I'm going to assume that many here on the call know what Costco is, or Walmart, or Target, and have definitely been to them. What happens when the closest one of those three, or the plethora of other large big box stores, is 40 miles from your house, and you have to take 4 buses to get there, and oh, you only make $500 a week, so buying something in bulk pretty much wipes you out for the week. This is something that people who live in under-resourced communities who make less than they should be making face every day. So where many of us can go on to Amazon and just purchase what we need in bulk, they can't. And so what that means is that purchasing, and I'm going to use diapers because it's something I'm very familiar with. Purchasing bulk diapers on Amazon costs approximately 25 cents per diaper, depending on the size of the diaper and a whole lot of other things. But for general purposes, it costs about 25 cents per diaper. When you don't have the ability to get to a bulk purchasing location and or afford to purchase in bulk, you wind up going to a local bodega. And a local bodega sells diapers in sets of 16 or 24. And those diapers cost between 50 and 60 cents per diaper. So the families that are making the least amount of money are paying the most amount of money for basic necessities. And that is truly all about access, the ability to get to a place where you can purchase, and the ability to be able to purchase. Moving down to childcare. Again, transportation, especially in Westchester. Most families don't have a lot of options when it comes to childcare because they can't get their children anywhere but to a local resource, right? So if you're living in Brooklyn and you know of a childcare provider that is in Queens that is very affordable, you can hop on a subway and get to Queens and bring your children there. You can't do that in Westchester. So if you live in Yonkers, you're going to find a local, walkable, usually, provider of childcare. Now, childcare, every single childcare provider, except for very few which are federally funded, which are truly almost none in Westchester County, every childcare place requires that babies come with every diaper and every wipe they need for the day. You cannot drop your child at daycare without the right number of diapers. So now let's go back up to bulk purchasing. You can't purchase diapers in bulk. You're purchasing 16 at a time. That 16 is pretty much the only amount of diapers you have for the week. Childcare usually requires between 6 and 8 diapers in order for you to drop your child off. So again, we're seeing access. So you don't actually have access to childcare. You need to find a childcare somewhere with childcare that does provide diapers. There are a lot of smaller private childcare centers that do provide diapers or get diapers from organizations like 914 Cares, and therefore make it easier for families to access childcare. The last thing that I want to talk about with respect to childcare is something that I don't really think anyone thinks about. So about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I should have the date in my head, but I don't. New York State increased the minimum wage. Specifically, it's a gentle rollout, and so right now the minimum wage is only $20 in New York City, but it's coming to Westchester and other locales. So what does that do? Everyone shouts to the roof, so important. We have to increase the minimum wage. You know, I'm always watching CNN and MSNBC, and they're constantly showing like minimum wage, minimum wage, minimum wage. What we don't think about, and what we at 914 Cares have heard so much from the social workers that we deal with on a regular basis, is that when someone goes from making $12 an hour to $15 an hour, and they work 40 hours a week, it takes them from under $26,500 to over $26,500. What does that mean? It means they're not eligible for free federal daycare. It means that now they have to start paying the cost of childcare. So I'm not advocating against increasing the minimum wage, but childcare specifically sees a lot of problems with access with respect to federal poverty line, right? So a lot of places are working to increase the federal poverty line so that it at least comes to be with 40 hours a week at whatever the minimum wage is. The last thing that is just an unbelievable issue when it comes to access to childcare is judgment on children of non-legal immigrants to the United States. So any child born in the United States is a U.S. citizen and should receive the same opportunities of childcare as any other child. But because parents who are uncomfortable with coming forward and receiving any government aid for fear of being found out, many of them don't take the opportunity. And so there are a ton of excluded workers who have children who don't take advantage of working under the federal poverty line and therefore getting free education. Free childcare. I'm just keeping track of the time. Okay, moving to education. So in general, I don't think this is a big shock, but in larger under-resourced communities, public education is underfunded. There's no other way to argue it. Taxes are extremely low, and there are significant numbers of families living together under the same roof. So there's families who don't pay city taxes or town taxes, and so the school districts themselves are extraordinarily underfunded. And what that means is that the education is completely subpar to education in other towns and communities where it is not underfunded. So it automatically, children, babies born in communities that are under-resourced, they automatically lack access to the same type of education that families in non-under-resourced communities have. The last thing I want to talk about with respect to education and transportation, but specifically education, is that in underfunded locales, there is a lack of after-school activities. So it's not just the education itself is lacking in the sense that classrooms have 36 kids versus, in other school districts where 25 is the limit, but there's less opportunities for them to learn outside of the classroom. So recently we were contacted by the lacrosse coach at a high school in Yonkers, and over the summer, all of his lacrosse gear was stolen from wherever it was being kept, and they can't play lacrosse. Like no one on the lacrosse team has their own lacrosse stuff. They can't afford it. And so it was either 914 Cares tries to find them lacrosse gear so that the kids can play, or they don't get to play. And it's a really big problem. One district in particular is that I always tout, and I have to tout because I'm so impressed with them. So Ossining is a very under-resourced district with an incredible superintendent who is really knowledgeable and really thoughtful and understands that education just doesn't stop in the classroom. And so he has been working on getting both after-school activities and Saturday activities for the children. And they unfortunately, right before the pandemic, they instituted what they call a Saturday learning program. And so it's from 9 to 12, and they have volunteers come in and run different programs for the students. And he actually did a really good job of sort of keeping it alive and going during the pandemic. So now I'm going to talk stats. The stats on the screen right now are national stats, national and New York stats. Only one of them is New York stat. But I think it's really important for everyone to really get the extent of poverty in our country. I mean, if you see the first stat, 150 children under the age of 3 are living under the federal poverty line. Again, the federal poverty line is so low that that number should be tripled, if not quadrupled in reality, right? Because it's not just Westchester where the 80,000 is, what the poverty line should be. It's in so many other wealthy communities. Literacy. So this stat has been in my mind since the day I started 914 Cares, but students who aren't reading by 3rd grade are 23% less likely to graduate from high school. What does that mean? Well, students in under-resourced communities, their families do not choose purchasing books over purchasing food or diapers or medicine. And so most children in under-resourced communities do not have a home library. Most libraries and classrooms in under-resourced districts do not have full, complete libraries. So children who are in under-resourced communities are not having the access to books, we'll use access a lot, are not having the access to books that other children have. And as we see, that automatically gives them a 23% less chance of graduating high school and less chance of becoming successful. So the diaper deprivation, it's come up a lot in the pandemic. CNN did a whole thing on it a few days ago. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal about 3 months ago, and the New York Times about 6 months ago. It's sort of really coming to light right now because diapers, nobody really thought of diapers as a basic need, which is silly but true until the pandemic started. So a lot of the numbers I'm actually showing you are pre-COVID numbers, so they're probably skewed a little. There's been, unfortunately, everyone in my industry has been struggling just to get the stuff to the families and to those in need versus doing, sort of focusing on the numbers. But in general, 1 in 3 families in the US struggle to provide diapers for their children. Just as an idea, diapers cost between $60 and $80 per month. To have full, complete diapers for your children. And like we talked about, childcare requires diapers, so 56% of parents using childcare have missed work because they don't have enough diapers. Period poverty is a very new issue that is being raised. Again, it's sort of being raised because of the pandemic, but it has been a very big issue for the last 100 years since we started recognizing that periods are just a basic life issue. So if you see 1 in 5 teens in the US struggle to afford period products, what does that mean? It means that menstruators, we call them menstruators and not women because there are transgender men who still get their period. Menstruators, really, it's 40 days of school per year is sort of like a small number. The number I was going to put in is 148 days a year. So menstruators usually miss 148 days of their school term. So from the time they start menstruating until they graduate, as opposed to their non-menstruating peers. So it's basically 148 days less of education if you can't afford a tampon. Okay, so Westchester Stats. I'm sure most of you will not be shocked to know Westchester is the 8th wealthiest county in the United States. What I found amazing was 9 of our communities are among the top 100 richest in the nation. Now, Westchester's a really small county, and 9 of our communities, right? So compare it with Malibu and Greenwich, 9 of our communities are in the 100 richest in the nation. Okay, the median property value is 2.5 times higher than the national average. The median household income is $30,000 a year over the national average. I mean, we are a wealthy county. And here are the sad facts. 40% of babies are born to families on Medicaid. What does that mean? 40% of the babies born in Westchester County every year are born to families that make less than the federal poverty line. Not the 80,000, the 26,000. What does this do? Well, babies who are born to families that are at low income, living in homelessness or have experienced homelessness are much more likely to experience medical issues, health issues, physical issues, behavioral development issues, poverty. 12.3%. This is such an old statistic. I mean, I've seen a lot of other statistics come through since the pandemic. I think it's almost up to 19%, but every organization is coming up with new numbers. And so 12.3 is what it was in 2019, 12.3 or 19% of households live at or below the poverty line. That is not taking into account the $80,000. It's only taking into account the $26,000. With respect to food insecurity, which I think everybody really understands so much now because of the pandemic, 21% of residents are food insecure, and 28%, this is a huge number, 28% of children in grades K through 6 receive free and reduced lunch. That's a huge, huge number. We haven't really talked about homelessness. Oh, sorry, hold on, what happened?
Jessica, you have 2 more minutes.
Okay, no problem. Hold on. Sorry, we have, okay. So personally, I think this is more important. I'll make 2 seconds on the poverty symposium. So homelessness, we really haven't talked about it a lot, but you'll see the stats there. There's a ton of homeless shelters in Westchester County. Most people don't think of it that way. 3,000, and there's over 2,800 children that live in homeless shelters. So the Poverty Symposium and collaboration. So as Janita knows, funding for nonprofits is very difficult to come by. And one of the reasons why 914 Cares has decided to use collaboration as an approach is because when you collaborate with other nonprofits, you get to take both of your funding sources and be able to help more, increase the ability to help those in need. We are huge proponents of collaboration, not only with nonprofits, but with foundations and with school districts. And that's sort of what the Westchester Symposium was, the Poverty Symposium. You know, we took, each year we take 3 or 4 different collaborations and we throughout Westchester, and we highlight them and we talk about the benefits to create solutions to poverty through collaboration. I think I made it. Is that 2 minutes?
You did, you made it. Thank you so much, Jessica, for sharing your stats and everything that you're doing with 914 Cares. You know, it's collaboration is at the heart of what what makes my money workshop work. So I want to thank you for highlighting that. And everyone, next year when the symposium comes about, please join because it's a great time. Thank you, Jessica, so much for joining us today. I loved hearing everything you had to share, and anything stats related, my staff and everyone else knows that I'm right there with you. These are really important stats that everybody has to keep in mind. Access to these very essential needs. You know, we don't think about those things. We don't think about the diapers and the cost of living when we talk about the need to budget, right? How do you budget for food when you have to pay rent? Those are real needs that people are choosing. Those are choices that people have to make every day. So thank you so much for highlighting that and joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Great, thank you. So as we connect to our next panel, I am going to just get, I think all of our panelists are here this morning. So bear with us as we go through this and highlight you all. Let's see. We've got Celine. We'll start with you so that we can get okay. I might not be able to pin everybody, but I want to welcome you, Celine, as we get our panel organized. Celine is our My Money Workshop's board secretary. She is also a big proponent of women in financial literacy. I'll leave it for you to introduce yourself a little bit as we get our panel situated. But thank you so much for moderating our panel this morning. We're very excited to hear from everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Janeda. Should I get going or are you still pinning people?
We'll pin people as we start going, but let's go ahead and get going.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. And thank you again, Janeda. Thankfully, we have 5 great panelists, so we are going to hear from them and not me for most of this panel. But I'm very excited to be here and have really enjoyed this morning so far. As I said, we have a lot to cover, so I'm going to hand it over to the panelists. To get started, could everyone please introduce themselves, explain their connection to My Money Workshop, and answer why they have centered their work around supporting women? And with that, I will hand it over. Laura, I see you first, so maybe I'll hand it off to you.
Good morning. Thank you, Celine. So happy to be here. I found My Money Workshop looking at a list of volunteer opportunities in Volunteer New York, and I am so happy I found this organization. I love the work we do and have hosted a number of workshops. My background is I'm a career changer, and for the last 5 years have been a financial planner working specifically with women. I am always struck by both how very bright and capable we women are, and also the fears we have around confronting, understanding, organizing our finances. So it's really a privilege that I have both to represent My Money Workshop with different groups and in general to be empowering women to take control of their one of their most important resources in addition to time and energy, which is money.
Thank you. Anyone want to go next?
Sure, I'll go. My name is Ramona Thomas. I am a financial advisor. I also am a volunteer instructor with My Money Workshop. And I came into the industry after 2 careers. One is in nonprofit education, philanthropy, and the other as an entrepreneur, mostly because of my own experience working with an advisor who actually changed my life financially. And I really wanted to pay forward what he did for me and working with other women and help people with investing and saving. And so this is my opportunity to pay it forward.
Thank you, Ramona.
I'll go next. Hi, everyone. Maria Palma here. Here today representing the Kota Alliance, which I'm a board member of. Also, like Ramona, I'm a financial advisor at Morgan Stanley. Kota is an umbrella organization offering collaboration across women. We focus on women-centered enterprises, social enterprises, and entrepreneurs. And we share their goal of, improving gender equality and supporting them and supporting women. What we offer is trainings, different resources, and we focus on giving them all sorts of different improvements in areas of wellness. entrepreneurship and social enterprise. And My Money Workshop is one of our partner organizations. So that's why we've worked together quite a lot in the past few years. Really happy to be here.
Thanks, Maria.
I'll go next. Helene Reda. I've been with My Money since pretty much the beginning, since 2009, when it was just Dick Yaffa and Gary Gordon. I found, similar to Laura, found an ad on the Chase alumni website that talked about they were looking for volunteers. And what attracted me is that they were also going into the prisons. And the reason I got involved with this was it was right after the financial crisis. I have a background in finance. I worked for Chase, ABN AMRO, and UBS. But when the financial crisis hit, I found myself in a position that many of these women do, being completely unprepared. And I thought that if I could tell my story and share my experiences and could change just one life, that I would have made a difference. And that's what brought me to My Money. And I've been here, like I said, since 2009.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Naisha Rivera. I am here from the Women's Prison Association, WPA, and I oversee our workforce development department. My background is in social work and public health, and I'm really excited to be here. And I wanted to go last to hear if everyone was working in the financial sector. I do not, right? So I'm working in nonprofit, but even in working in nonprofit, I certainly recognize the importance of financial literacy. And our connection with My Money Workshop came about actually through one of our board members who had a connection to My Money Workshop. And through running our program for a few years, we quickly recognized that a major piece that was missing in our job readiness support for women was financial literacy, because women would begin working and then their money would be gone just as quickly as they received it. And so we wanted to find ways, if we're looking for ways to help women tap into and activate their power from within, financial literacy is a huge part of that. And that's how we began working with My Money Workshop. And our partnership has expanded considerably over the last few years, and it's been amazing.
Great, thank you. And thank you everyone for these introductions. I loved reading your backgrounds and just reading the different ways each of you are empowering women, and it was really inspiring. So let's get started. The first real question is for Helene and Naisha. Traumatic events can affect how we deal with money, and more so when you've had to deal with a traumatic event like going to prison. How can our work help build confidence in women? And what do you see as the key to ensuring that the women you work with specifically are supported?
So the first thing that comes to mind for me when thinking about helping the women to feel supported and empowered is access and opportunity are two huge things that we focus on at WPA, because we recognize that the women that we serve are amazing in so many ways. And often the only thing that people tend to focus on is the fact that they've been systems involved. So they've been impacted by the criminal legal system, and that's often what people want to focus on. But there's so many other facets of who they are. And so our work really focuses on creating access to opportunities that women otherwise would not have had access to. So like a financial literacy training that runs for 2 weeks and helps them to learn about their credit score and all these other things, ways in which they can empower themselves financially. And so for me and our team at WPA, it is critically important for a woman to have financial literacy, because if she's coming out of an experience of incarceration, often women are coming back into poverty. Women are much more likely to come back into the community and face housing insecurity and to face unemployment. and so now add in the pandemic, and you can imagine that that has been increased considerably. And so providing women access to financial literacy from the beginning is crucial, because as they begin working, we want them to have those tools to begin saving, to begin pursuing whatever goals it is that they have.
Thank you. Helene.
Helene, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Okay, so one of the things I find when I go in and I talk to the women is that they don't even know the fundamental questions to ask. So when I start talking about financial literacy and we go through budgeting and we mention, credit scores and things like that, they're not even sure what they should be asking so that they can help provide for their families when they get out. They don't know where to look. They are intimidated because they feel everybody's going to look at me as I've just gotten released from prison. I've been incarcerated. And I try to tell them and build up their confidence by telling them, you're no different than anybody else. You need to be able to go out, ask the right questions so that you have the tools that you can support your family. Most of the women that I talk to, if I ask a few questions, you'll find out that most of them have families, they have children, and they are looking for a way to be able to take care of them when they get out. And they find that they're pretty much at a loss because they don't know. And the financial industry has changed so much since a lot of these women were incarcerated that they think they know the answer, but they really don't. So it's really important that we provide them with the building blocks and the questions that they should be asking so that when they get out, they can find these community groups that do provide that type of ongoing support.
Great, thank you. A question for our financial advisors, Ramona and Laura. Women earn 76 cents of every dollar a man earns. What can women do to ensure they maximize their wealth at different stages of their life?
So I'll start, and Laura, just chime in whenever you're ready. One of the best pieces of financial advice I got from my advisor many years ago, and I share this with my clients, is, and while the statistic you just shared really is terrible, it's not what you make, it's what you do with what you make. And so I've seen that in practice where you have people who make six figures, they make a lot of money, but they spend more than they earn. And so it's really figuring out how to maximize making 76 cents to the dollar. Financial management and budgeting are going to be really important. And so a couple of quick tips that people should think about no matter how much money you make. Women tend to put themselves last behind, partners and spouses and children and family members. Pay yourself first. Always invest in you first. So save first. Find a way, if you work on a job that provides a 401k or a 403b, if you're a nonprofit, invest in your future. Always put some money aside for yourself. So that's tip number one. Tip number two, the thing that you can control the most is what you spend. You can't always control what you make in terms of your salary, but you can control your expenses. So when you're thinking about budgeting and financial management, really pay attention to what's going out. Oftentimes people they spend and save what's left over, which is why many people have a hard time saving. And so what I'm encouraging people to think about is earn what you earn, save first, and then spend what's left over, because that allows you to really have a little more control over your expenses and how you're spending your resources.
And as a follow-up to Ramona, I'll tell a quick story and then give another piece of financial advice. When I first started, I have my own financial planning firm. I did not have an office. And the first woman I visited lived in a row house in, I believe it was in Yonkers, well, no, Westchester County. And she was wearing a polyester pantsuit, I'll say no more. And when I looked at her financial statement, she was worth millions of dollars. And the next woman I visited lived in this pristine, gorgeous home. The back of the home had, open windows to a pool. And relative to her spending, she had very little money. So my advice, and I give this to my children as well, is keep your fixed expenses. Your largest fixed expense is going to be your rent or your mortgage, to not more than half of what you're bringing home each month, so that you can indeed pay yourself first and still have some left over for time with friends. In Westchester County, it's hard to keep your fixed expenses low, but pay attention to what you're committing to so that you have room to save and to also have fun.
Thank you. And great advice from both of you. So thank you. Should all be following that more. Maria, the Kota Alliance creates programming for young women and teens. How can we best empower our next generation of women?
Great. That's actually a great question. Since the beginning, we've always thought that it's really important to start young and to really engage with women at an early stage. And I think through our Kota Academy, particularly, we've actually built a pretty robust training and program where we engage with young women quite early through our partner organizations and through different programs we put out there, because that's really how you truly correct many of the issues we encounter, particularly in the low income areas. We've seen it happen more and more here in the north part of Manhattan, where, pandemic or non-pandemic times, we've seen so many young women eager to learn different things, amongst which, of course, is learning how to save and how to make money and how to truly plan for their future. And we believe that planning is not only education related, it's also, as Ramona and Laura mentioned, finance related. So putting a bit of financial planning into everything we do, into our education programs, has proven to be very, very helpful. So we truly think that if you start basically establishing a system that works early on, you can correct a lot of the issues we encounter on adult women nowadays, where there's quite a bit of a different ideal when it comes to saving. No.
Definitely, and we agree with that as well. Thank you. Our final question is for everyone, and if you don't like the question, feel free to share some other wisdom if you prefer. But the final question is, how can we as a society do better in educating your respective communities on the importance of financial literacy?
So for me, at WPA, we serve primarily Black and Latinx women, and that pretty much mirrors what women's involvement looks like in the criminal legal system. And something that we've recognized as being very important is making sure that any type of material we're bringing before women is relatable and tailored to that specific group of women. And that has been an amazing part of working with My Money Workshop, because, sitting down with Janeda and Marisol and kind of going through, here are the things that the women we are working with share with us. How can we survey them directly? All these things, so that we hear from the women what it is that they know, don't know, and want to know. So that way we're bringing material to them that they can digest and then take and actually apply. I think when we first started our workforce work back in 2017, we were working with a different group and immediately recognized that this was not going to work. We had women telling us, like, this is not relatable. Talking about a huge budget, I'm working with like Medicaid, and I'm working with a few dollars from public assistance. This is not relatable to me, so I can't even begin to hear the instructor. So I think that is a huge key if we're going to bring financial literacy to any community, but certainly women who have been impacted by the criminal legal system. It's hugely important to make sure that that material feels relatable to the women, and that has to be informed by them. I would also say that it's important to help women to recognize that they have power within. And so I think maybe it was Laura that was speaking about that. And that is huge, because often women don't ask because they don't think that they can ask. So I'm thinking about like salary negotiation and things like that when women are starting a new job, and often women just take whatever is being offered. And so a huge part of our work is helping women to understand that there often is more on the table than you recognize, and here's how you can go about negotiating things. If it's not salary, what other benefits might there be? And that all comes with education.
Definitely, thank you. Great.
I also want to echo what I just heard, which is the the teaching from my money workshop, which is catered to each population we teach to. I just recently was involved in a workshop with high school students, and even with my own children that are reaching young adulthood, how there is no information about how much one should spend and how much one should save. We're just supposed to sort of grow up and know this automatically, and it's often not taught in our school system. So it's so important to have resources available to our young people to start to educate about how much one should be saving, how much one should be spending. I also saw there was a question about earning. What do we need to do to actually increase the earnings for women? And that's back to empowering women to believe you can go into STEM, you can go into finance, you can go into coding, and there are more organizations set up to, again, I feel like it's the empowerment that's important. Of course, we are head and shoulders above, not to hurt any men out there, but women are so driven and so bright and so capable, and yet we imbibe what our culture teaches us about, what are the appropriate professions for us to go into.
Definitely. And thank you both for the sort of positive feedback on how the My Money Workshop team has customized the materials and the curriculum. I know they spend a lot of time doing that. So it's nice to hear that you sort of appreciate it, as do your communities.
Yeah, I think what I would add to what both of them said before is the corporate work, right? They need to be contributors to this amazing new era of women we're sort of seeing now and experiencing it more and more. And there needs to be a strong focus on the low income communities particularly. And I think by educating the corporate world as well, we can establish, we can also help, bridge more relationships that are more accordingly to women and what their needs are, and as well close that gap that we're seeing today, and hopefully walk to a different future. So offering not only the right salary and the right earning power for them, but also offering different things that help with their families and childcare and other different resources that would benefit women in growing their careers is definitely a good way to also educate the population as well on this change that we're all aiming for.
I think the other thing too is ensuring that we don't make the assumption that if somebody now has gotten that great job, that they know exactly how to manage their money, because usually the two don't go hand in hand. You find women, especially across all different socioeconomic backgrounds, that depending on how you were brought up, you may not have reached out to find and ask those right questions. So making sure that they have all the tools that they need will certainly help them going forward.
I would just add, it's definitely about empowerment, and I think providing support and resources in a different kind of way. I think, women tend not to talk about finances because of shame and guilt around bad decisions or feeling like they should be in a certain place where they're not. So I think we have to sort of let go of judgment, like whatever stigma we have around money and how it measures our self-worth and the place that we, hold in society. I think we have to start letting that go so that we can be open enough and vulnerable enough to have those conversations, to be resources to other women. And I would just add, I will say this too, I think we have to, there's so much on the internet. There's so many free resources available. So I think the younger we start in terms of getting access to teenagers and girls, but also just kind of helping people prioritize. When you think about how much time social media platforms kind of gearing people towards reading and more information around financial, resources that they can use in their own lives. It's just, so I think it's a combination of those things and what everyone else said.
Thank you. And I wish we could keep discussing. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you again to everyone. I personally feel empowered, and I hope everyone else does as well. And with that, I will hand it over to Janeda.
Thank you so much, Celine and Laura and Naisha and Ramona and Helene and Maria. You've shared amazing insight today. And as Celine said, we could talk about women empowerment and especially financial literacy and the importance of educating women in this way all day. But hopefully maybe we'll do it for the next forum. Thank you again, all of you, so much for your partnership and support of My Money Workshop. So we're going to move along and get our next speaker ready. And I saw Kara in 1 second. Kara, I will put you up on the screen. And as a way of introduction for Kara, I'll let you know that I was at an event that they had recently where they shared these survey stats or these survey findings, and I immediately reached out and I said, hey, we're doing this forum. I really think that there's a platform for you to share this. And so I'm really excited for her to talk to you today just about what they found by surveying all their population. So Kara, I'll let you go ahead, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. My name is Kara Smith, and I am the Collective Impact Manager for Policy and Communications at South Bronx Rising Together. And South Bronx Rising Together is a collective impact initiative in the heart of the South Bronx. We work specifically in Community District 3 in the Bronx. And we work alongside businesses, nonprofits, community residents to really harness grassroots power to change some of the most pressing problems that our neighbors are experiencing. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Great. So let's see, I'll go to the next slide here. So in the fall of 2020, we had been working with our K through 12 stakeholders in the South Bronx on a variety of issues that students were experiencing, online learning, all of that. And one of the things that our stakeholders surfaced was that there are so many surveys circulating right now, trying to get a sense of what families are experiencing in light of COVID. And so you had food pantries passing out surveys that were more geared towards food insecurity and trying to measure that. We knew that our school partners were trying to understand how kids are faring with online learning. But there wasn't necessarily a survey that was out there that covered, a variety of issues. And so what we did was we convened our Bronx educators, community advocates, and began to explore the idea of creating a common needs assessment. And so, all through collaboration and whatnot, we decided that we would launch this survey that covered online learning, childcare, mental health, food access, and housing stability. And that we would target Bronx residents and Bronx parents, but really this survey would be open to all New York City parents. So in October 2020, we released the survey. It was open until December 2020, and then we began an analysis. And there's actually, I'll go ahead and put it in the chat here. In early 2021, we released a report of the responses coming out of Bronx Community District 3. But during our time today, I'm going to be talking about citywide results as well as Bronx results from the survey. So that's the link to the Bronx CD3 report there in the chat. So more than 50% of our responses came from the Bronx. That's not very surprising. That's where most of our stakeholders are based out of. 75% of respondents identified as Hispanic or Latinx, 15% identified as Black. 60% spoke Spanish as their first language. 50% lived below the federal poverty level. And we had a fairly good representation of students who, by way of their parents, were represented in the survey across the really pre-K through 12 school system. So when we asked parents about education and childcare, we found that almost 85% of Black caregivers reported that they were worried or concerned about sending their kids back to the school building. I'll note that, you know, this data was collected in October, November, and December of 2020, so much has changed. But we do see some hesitancy, especially with families of color, specifically Black families, with returning their kids to the school building. We also asked about whether or not families had trusted adults at their school. And Spanish-speaking caregivers were less likely to report that they had trusted adults at their children's schools. And out of the 81 respondents who had a child who received language or disability services, only about a quarter reported the inability to access services remotely, which is seemingly small, but we know that you know, those children still matter. The 22% who need special learning services, they weren't receiving them online, so that was certainly problematic. We also know that caregivers with children in pre-K and elementary school reported relatively worse learning experiences for their children. And so we asked questions along the lines of, you know, do your children seem to understand their assignments? Are they connecting with their teachers? So that's how we were gauging that. And 13% of caregivers of pre-K students reported feeling like they had time to help their children at home. We know that parents were swamped with so many you know, duties and working from home, and having to help their children learn online certainly was a challenge. And we also asked about childcare, right? Because that whole system has really been uprooted in terms of what childcare looks like during a pandemic. And 35% of caregivers reported that they had not found childcare for their children. And we know that's due to a variety of issues. You know, some providers closed their doors, but also the hours of care that were necessary for families certainly changed. So when we asked questions around housing and food insecurity, 75% of residents or respondents reported being worried about having the ability to purchase food, and almost 60% of households received free meals or groceries since at least once since March of 2020. With housing, about half reported that they were not confident that they would be able to make their next rent or mortgage payment. And among households in poverty and respondents from Brooklyn and Queens, more than 60% reported they had no confidence. When we ask questions around mental health, you know, we understand that isolation has done so much to both students and parents and individuals. And about a quarter of respondents reported that they had looked for mental health support since March. And when we asked about barriers to accessing support, and this is more formalized support, so when you think about therapy, the most commonly cited barrier was the lack of health insurance. And only 3% of respondents reported finding mental health support from in-person therapy. 18% reported they found that through virtual therapy. And you know, this comes as no surprise, but really the majority of respondents reported that they found their support through just talking with friends and family. And so that's, we certainly shouldn't underscore the power of connecting with people, but we know that that's been particularly tricky, especially with stay-at-home mandates and whatnot. So when we looked at our Bronx families, and of course that's where we do most of our work, so we were certainly interested in that. Over half of Bronx families did not have reliable internet for online learning. 1 in 5 Bronx households were without adequate childcare for their families. So that means that parents had not been able to find childcare that they needed. We still see 70% of Bronx caregivers expressing worry about sending their children back to school. And we also found that very few parents had a great understanding for the school's expectations around participation and assignments for their children. Again, this is with a focus on the Bronx. Nearly 3 in 4 Bronx households were worried about being able to afford food or have enough food. We found that almost 2 in 5 Bronx households were worried about paying next month's rent. And of the families that received free groceries, we found that 50% or 35% were completely satisfied with the quality of the food that they received. And that's really been a huge thing we've been thinking about. We know that so many individuals are accessing free food, free groceries, but also it's so important that families still have choice and that they're getting quality food. Emergency food services should not mean that, quality or even making sure that food is appropriate for a variety of diets, whether that's, personal preference because of health needs or even religious needs, that shouldn't be secondary, that should be a primary concern. So that's also something that we just found quite interesting here. And with mental health, about a quarter of Bronx caregivers reported that they had sought mental health support since March of 2020. The most common barrier for Bronx caregivers was that they had a challenge around knowing where to find support. And like I said, it's no surprise, 70% of Bronx residents cited talking with friends and loved ones as a helpful form of mental health support. So you'll see this in the link that I put in the chat to the report, but as a part of this report, we came up with a variety of policy recommendations. We want to use data in a way that helps move certain outcomes forward. And so we see a real clear path here with influencing policy. So the online learning policy recommendations, a lot of that is centered around holding the New York City Department of Education accountable, as they are the ones that are in charge of getting devices to kids. And we know that that's still, even now in April of 2021, is still an issue. But we're also looking at holding internet service providers accountable. And we've seen a lot of movement there of providing reduced cost Wi-Fi, but there's still a lot to be done there. With childcare, we're really looking at making childcare more affordable. It's come up a few times even on our call today. Childcare is expensive, and especially when you have a lot of parents still unemployed or even seeking extended hours for childcare, it's certainly difficult there. Around mental health support, we found that, our stakeholders that we work with who work in the line of mental health, so much of what they, we're hoping to see is not only, mental health being normalized and encouraged and talked about, but also, equipping our schools to be able to connect with parents and students just to make sure that they're okay, and offering support to them. And then with food access, I touched on this a little bit earlier, but really making sure that emergency food services are prioritizing nutritional value and cultural appropriateness of emergency food items. And some of this is a little out of date because these were our original policy recommendations back in 2020, but expanding PEBT and making sure that that's a resource that can be used on an expanded level. And then we have housing security. We've seen a lot with rent relief, rent forgiveness, but just making sure that we're really pushing that even throughout 2021, holding landlords accountable for violations and mistreatment during the pandemic times, and increasing knowledge about right to counsel and expanding the threshold for that. And that brings me to the end of my presentation here. But I know I'm running a little bit short on time, but I guess with the last 4 minutes, I'll just open it up. If you all have any questions, I'm more than happy to dive into that.
Thank you so much, Kara. And as those questions are coming in, my question is, what are sort of the services that Bronx Rising Together? I know that the organization is an amalgam of a couple of organizations. So can you talk a little bit about that collaboration and sort of what you all do?
Yeah, absolutely. So at South Bronx Rising Together, most of what we do is convene and facilitate stakeholders around a variety of issues. So right now we're working quite a bit with the Bronx cohort to push through some digital equity work up in the Bronx. We're also working with family childcare providers and ensuring that students or young children have access to childcare, and that's becoming a more affordable route for families. We also do we're piloting some healing-centered school work, so working with a handful of schools in the Bronx to implement healing-centered policies and practices with their children. So we work primarily within really like the, I guess, infant to 12th grade range, and making sure that Bronx students and young children are supported. But all of our work is partner-led, so it relies heavily on collaboration between stakeholders, whether that's at schools or community-based organizations, and also community residents as well.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think if anyone who has been with us since this morning, who's watching on YouTube can attest by now, collaboration is really the key piece of how we can further our communities, not just economic success, but success across the board. And thank you definitely for joining us this morning and to highlight all these amazing stats. Because we know that it's not just about that education piece. We keep coming back to the access piece. Is how can we make our resources, these amazing resources that are available to everyone, accessible to everyone. So I don't see any questions coming in, but it doesn't mean that any people don't have them. I think it's the form of I think we'll yep, I don't see any coming in, but thank you so much, Kara, for sharing again your insights and for joining us today. Thank you so much for calling when I reached out. I really do appreciate it.
Of course, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Great, thank you. So with that, we will take a few minutes break, I think, for all of us who have been sitting here since this morning at 9. We will just take a few minutes. We will be back at 11:57:58 so that we can get ready for our next speaker. Thank you all so much. We'll be right back. All right, are we all back? I think we are almost all back. So we will get Winston.
Hey there, can you hear and see me, Janeda?
Yep, I
Great.
can.
Great.
I'm gonna spotlight you. I'm gonna stop. Are you running slides?
Nope.
Okay, so we'll see you. You are spotlighted for everybody. We'll just wait a couple more minutes, or one more minute to see if a couple of people come back, and then we can get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. Winston and I, as we're getting started, Winston and I connected right when I joined my money workshop in 2018. I attended an event where Winston was presenting, and since then, we have utilized the Department of Financial Services as a partner resource when we are talking to college students, high school and college students, as they're preparing to understand student loans and the just sort of breadth of resources that are available to them. So I'm very thankful for Winston joining us this morning. I think with that, Winston, we can get started.
Great, thank you. And just to add on to that, I remember when we did meet at an event, and it was also like my first week or something with the Department of Financial Services. So we were both very new, but very eager. And I think it's a really good, I didn't even have business cards at the time. It was like, my first or second day, but just such a good reminder of how important it is to show up, right? Because we've had a great relationship since then, and we just sort of met by chance. And even in these COVID times, right, we're all showing up here virtually. So thank you, Janeda and My Money Workshop for giving us that forum to do that, and for inviting me and the Department of Financial Services, and for all the other great presenters so far today. So, I'm really excited about this forum for a number of reasons, but, we're just living in increasingly complex times in society. And I think financial literacy and the various organizations that support individuals navigating the financial landscape are so important, whether it's the rise of fintech or the move to online banking services or just COVID complicating everything. It's really important to be having these discussions and to be having them publicly, right? I think that's another important aspect. So, as Janeda said, my name is Winston Berkman-Breen, and I'm the Director of Consumer Advocacy and the Student Loan Advocate at the New York State Department of Financial Services. Before joining DFS about a little over 2 years ago, I was a legal services attorney representing low-income New Yorkers, predominantly those who are experiencing predatory debt collection or foreclosures or student loan issues. So that's sort of the background I bring to my current work. So I'm really looking forward to talking with you all a bit this morning about DFS's work around student loan debt and student loan debt in general, but did want to take a step back and talk about the Department of Financial Services, or DFS, more generally, because I think it's also, just as an institution, really relevant to the conversation we're having today and can be sort of an ongoing resources. Ultimately, what I'd like for folks here today, whether individuals who are tuning in or people who are representing organizations that serve individuals, what I'd love for us all to walk away with from my time is first, just knowing a little bit more about our state's financial regulator, DFS. It's not something most people know much about, but can play a very powerful role in individuals' lives and in the financial services and financial literacy spaces. And second, knowing about a particular resource with respect to student loan debt, as Janeda mentioned. For both, I think, as is probably true for all of the folks who've joined us today, this is just sort of the tip of the iceberg and the beginning for much longer term conversations, because we could have entire day-long forums on any one of these topics. So with that in mind, so DFS is the state's financial regulator. What is a financial regulator? We, in short, oversee the financial services sector, things like lenders, state chartered banks or credit unions, the insurance industry, loan servicers, check cashers, money transmitters, these things that have a sort of financial product or service feel to them, budget planners. For those industry actors, for the most part, to do business in New York, they have to come in and either get a license with our office or sort of sign up with us. And then they also have to follow the rules of the road that either DFS sets or the legislature has set and we implement. So we, you may have heard of at the federal level, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, or the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the OCC, or the FDIC, these sort of alphabet soup of federal agencies. We are the state version of that, and we are sort of all of those embodied in one state agency called the Department of Financial Services. We have a statutory mandate to ensure the financial sector in New York is working and growing, but also have a statutory mandate to make sure that we are protecting consumers and spurring opportunity for individuals and households and small businesses to invest in themselves and to grow wealth and to flourish here in New York. So I think those mandates really, in our activity really boil down into three buckets. The first is, implementing state laws and developing rules of the road for the actors that are regulated here in New York. So that's the first. The second is investigating and sort of supervising and keeping an eye out on those actors and making sure rules are being followed and enforcing the rules when we have to. And then the third, which is sort of what we're here to talk about today, is to educate New Yorkers and to generate opportunities for New Yorkers in the financial services sort of economic area. And these are all important, and I think they actually all do relate to financial literacy. Understanding the infrastructure that we're navigating. But in the last few years, to be honest, we've been investing more in that last bucket of engaging with community members, of engaging with stakeholders. We as a financial regulator regularly and sort of as the nature of what we do, interact with industry, but we've been pivoting more and broadening our scope to make sure we're reaching households, small business members, organizations that serve individuals and small businesses and things like that. So all the more reason we're excited to be part of today's conversation. So, why is financial literacy important, right? With that in mind. And I think Janetta actually said it earlier today, and I was glad to hear her sort of already put that on the table. Knowledge is power. Like, first and foremost, the more you know, the more empowered you are. And greater access to information about our finances and about consumer protections is part of financial empowerment. And by consumer protection, what I mean is sort of the laws or the rules that are put into place to make sure that financial industry actors behave appropriately and some specific rights that individuals have with respect to how they are treated by the financial system. So that's one aspect of why financial literacy is important, is that knowledge is power, and you can be a more empowered and knowledgeable person if you engage in financial literacy for yourself and your community. But I do want to say, and this sort of pivots into the second reason why I think it's important, that I think it's important to acknowledge, and I feel very strongly that there are some real structural impediments for some people and for some communities, and that basically we shouldn't expect anyone to, through financial literacy, educate their way out of structural racism, for example, right? Financial empowerment is super important, but we can't let it be a silver bullet to some of the very real problems. It is a perfect solution to some issues people face, but it's not going to be the structural change, except for the second reason why I think financial literacy is so important, is because the more we know, the greater our cry for change can be, right? And the easier it is to, in an informed manner, call on policymakers to make the change that we think needs to be made. So for instance, I work in a large state agency, and it can be very hard for us to know what's happening on the ground day to day for individuals. So the more that those individuals know their rights, the more they can sound the alarm and identify when their rights are being violated, or when the more they know about financial literacy more generally, the more they can identify areas in their community where there's the opportunity for growth or improvement or things like that. So for that reason, as a secondary reason, I think financial literacy is so important, because it makes almost like civics class, right? It makes for more informed stakeholders in New York who can then call for change and be a stronger actor for themselves and at the state level for that, or at the federal level. So again, why I'm thrilled we're having this conversation today, and why I think this work is so important. Part of it is just knowing what are the tools that are at your disposal. And I think that DFS can be one of those tools. As a regulator, we can be a resource to individuals or organizations that serve individuals when people are figuring out their finances, when they're trying to buy their first home, when they are experiencing an issue. We take complaints if you're having an issue with a financial service provider, or if you're navigating student loan debt and things. So before jumping into student loan debt, I want to, on that much broader, we, can't cover all of the bases that DFS, where it works, and opportunities for engagement, but I would encourage folks to check out our website, which is dfs.ny.gov. And there's a consumer sort of landing page and resource center there that you'll see that has a mix of sort of self-help information, but also information about connecting to other state agencies or organizations to help folks navigate. And it's constantly being updated to try to keep up with the times, especially during COVID when things are moving so quickly. We also, I should say, just to put on everyone's radar, we recently announced the creation of a statewide office for financial inclusion and empowerment, which will be housed at DFS, at the organization where I work. And we're very excited, only about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, to invite former New York State Assembly member Tremaine Wright from Brooklyn, here where I am, as the office's first director. So we're very excited about the work that that office will do, the Statewide Office for Financial Inclusion and Empowerment, very relevant to, I think, financial literacy, financial empowerment work. And it's in extremely early days, but please keep an eye out. And we're looking forward to both partnering and serving New Yorkers through that office. Okay, so student loan debt. It's part of the work that I do specifically at DFS. I work with a lot of the different business units we have, but one of the portfolios I work on in partnership with others is student loan debt and what New York and DFS can do with respect to student loans. So a few quick stats. They won't be quite as maybe probing as Jessica's were earlier, which I thought was so powerful, but I think it's a good backdrop for the conversation we'll continue now. So our country is just in the middle of a student loan debt crisis. It's just a place where we're at. And I think we have to acknowledge that. About 45 million people owe about or over $1.7 trillion in student loan debt. Here in New York, about 2.4 million New Yorkers collectively owe about $98 million in student loan debt, with the average student loan burden at about $41,000 here in New York. About 10% of New Yorkers are delinquent, which means they haven't quite defaulted yet, but they're past payments. And that's the stat here for New York. Again, we could have a whole day on student loan debt alone. I welcome that opportunity. We should all be talking about this. We could talk about who owns the debt, why women of color, Black women particularly, have a disproportionate student loan debt burden to other people who, there's many conversations we could have about this. But clearly, I think it's something that we can all acknowledge we all need to wrap our arms around and work on however we can. Student loan debt has grown over the last decade to be the largest household consumer debt type after housing debt, after mortgages, and that's greater than auto debt, that's greater than credit card debt for households. And it's also an intergenerational problem. It's both an intergenerational problem in the sense that younger people with student loan debt have to sort of delay savings and delay purchasing their first home and investing in a financial asset that they can grow as a nest egg and pass on to their children. But it's also an intergenerational problem because it's not really just a young person's problem, right? I think we think student loan debt, we think college age, maybe a little bit older for folks who didn't go straight through to school. But as of 2020, about 2/3 of borrowers specifically for federal student loans are over the age of 30, and about 20% of borrowers are over the age of 50, right? So we're increasingly seeing parents taking out loans for their children or grandchildren, parents co-signing on private loans, folks who are carrying this debt into their middle age or into their retirement. So it's really an intergenerational problem in all the sense of that term. So what is New York and what is DFS doing with respect to student loan debt? There's so much going on with student loan debt these days, right? And I think we need to acknowledge that the majority of student loan debt is federal student loan debt. A little about around 90%, and that's issued by the U.S. Department of Education. And there's lots of policy conversations happening out there. I encourage everyone to stay up on them about how the federal government will handle that debt. Will they cancel it? Will they cancel all of it? Some of it, Congress, executive action, et cetera. But what I want to focus you on and sort of tie back to DFS is that all student loan debt, whether it's federal student loan debt, whether it's private student loan debt, is serviced by private companies, right? So that bigger conversation, about federal or not federal, it doesn't matter with respect to the servicing so much. These private companies are now under DFS's regulatory sort of purview. And I should say also, there are many ways that DFS is involved in student loan debt origination, debt collection, et cetera. But I'm going to focus on the servicing because it's somewhat new and it's an important part of that experience because servicers are often for borrowers their first and or only point of contact with their student loans, right? They're the ones that you call if you have a problem. They send the bills, they process the payments, they apply the late fees, they facilitate the application for a federal relief program, et cetera. And what is important to understand is up until very recently, these private companies operated with very little oversight. There wasn't a student loan debt specific regulatory regime in place, the way that we have like a mortgage loan servicer or other specific controls. And, you know, for all the reasons I just said, like they're the primary point of contact. If things go wrong, they're the ones you should call. So it was very problematic that we didn't have a specific, nationwide, didn't have a specific way of overseeing these companies. And we saw a slew of lawsuits by attorneys general in the mid-2010s, about 2017. And after that, we started seeing states passing laws to oversee these companies specifically. So in 2019, New York passed a law that gave DFS the oversight over these companies. So we now license them and require them to come and comply with DFS rules and regulations if they're going to do business here in New York State. And what that law also did is it spelled out some very specific borrower protections with respect to student loan servicing, right? That relationship with the servicer. And those are new protections as of the law's effective date, which was the fall of 2019. So, you know, September 2019 to October 2019, when the law took effect, overnight, sort of a new game for student loan borrowers. There are new protections. Some of those protections have to do with how to apply payments, right? If you make an overpayment, you pay more than your monthly bill, what should happen to that extra part, right? Should the servicer be able to just apply it wherever they want to go? We've heard from folks earlier today, it's not just about how much money you make, it's how you use it. If you're making an overpayment, should it go to your loan with the biggest balance? Should it go to the loan with the highest interest rate because it'll accrue interest faster? Should it go to a loan that you can pay down fastest because it's almost done? You borrowers in New York now get a say in that, right? How about processing complaints? You know, DFS takes complaints, but now under the law, if you file a complaint with your servicer or DFS, there are specific time periods they have to reply to. There's more oversight there. You now have access, if you didn't before, the law requires access to your own records, right? Through an online portal and safe and secure. And this I always think is important to highlight because it seems shocking, but it's also part of the reason why we started seeing these lawsuits and these new laws in the 2010s is call center staff for servicers now are required under New York law to be knowledgeable about repayment options and to give accurate information. Unfortunately, that was not a legal requirement previously, and folks were getting bad information and were being harmed financially and otherwise for it. So again, think about that. It seems so simple, but now it's part of the law here in New York with respect to student loans. So this law, through empowering DFS with the oversight, made DFS a really powerful resource for borrowers and for consumer advocates working here in New York. But again, let's take it back to financial literacy. These protections are really only as powerful and useful as they are known and enforced, right? And because we're talking about financial literacy, I wanted to share that one thing DFS did at the end of 2019 when the law took effect is we created the Student Loan Borrower Bill of Rights for New York. What it is it's an easy to read, non-legalese explanation of what the law did. It's not helpful to, throw down a law and a legal citation in front of really anyone, let's be honest, right? That's not a very helpful tool or financial literacy exercise. So what we did is we took the accurate information, took out the legalese and put it into a 10-point Bill of Rights about your interaction and experience with student loan servicers. And that's available online. We used to sort of go around in person and around the state and try to introduce this tool, and then COVID happened, right? So now we take opportunities like this in our own outreach. But I would encourage folks to go online, and you can access that resource at dfs.ny.gov, that same base website /students. And you'll see a number of resources there, including the Bill of Rights. And I think that right now, even while the majority of student loans are subject to the federal government's COVID relief, not all student loans are, and again, we can talk about that. It's important for folks to take this opportunity to educate themselves, to figure out, this is a little bit of a pause, right? Is there anything you should be doing about your circumstances to change your future with respect to student loans? I think we all, many folks might hope for cancellation, but we shouldn't plan for cancellation of student loan debt, right? We should plan for, I'm gonna have to pay these loans back soon. Currently, it'll be in October of 2021. What can I be doing now to be in the best position then? So the Student Loan Borrower Bill of Rights is a great place to start because it tells you what your rights are, and then you can start interacting with your student loan servicer to pin down what might be the best path for you. And on that website, the dfs.ny.gov/students, there are a number of other resources on there that might be useful. Again, now during this pause time, or just more generally about the federal relief program. If you're unfamiliar with it, you can learn about it there, and it would keep it up to date. But also about how to pay for college. Janetta mentioned we've done some work together about preparing for financing education. Once you have education debt, student loans, what do you do with it? What's the difference between a grant and a loan? What's the difference between a federal loan and a private loan? you may have heard of this thing, public service loan forgiveness or income-driven repayment programs. What are those, and am I eligible for it, and what do I have to do to get signed up for it? Student loan, there's information on our website about student loan relief scams. Unfortunately, people take advantage of the fact that we're in a student loan debt crisis, and you might get a call about, the Biden student loan relief plan, right? And there's information about what to do there. I will plug, before I wrap up, that on that same website, dfsny.gov/students, there'll be a section you'll see called workshops. And we, in partnership sometimes, as we've done with My Money Workshop, and independently sometimes, host online presentations about managing your debt and paying for school. And we have 2 this week on Wednesday and Thursday evenings at 7 that are open to the public. So if you go there, there's no registration required, just an online link. You'll see information about that. So I'm going to wrap up, as I want to be able to have any sort of questions or conversations, but I do have sort of 3 calls to action, right, for this group and for folks who might, anyone you might speak to later today. And the first is check out our website, dfs.my.gov, check out My Money Workshop, check out all the websites of people who've been on here, and just make sure you're aware of the resources available to you, whether it's information or just an organization like DFS as a resource. And then spread the word. And I thought Nichol talked about this well earlier today. These conversations can be very stigmatizing, and we should all be working together to destigmatize them. And that's why it's important to talk about this in public. Talk about it at dinner, talk about it at work, tell your friends, just normalize talking about finances. So that's number 2. And number 3, a lot of folks here I think are New Yorkers. So we all know when you see something, say something, right? The more empowered you are, the more able you are to flag issues and that this doesn't look right, or you've experienced something. So I would encourage you, at least for DFS, file a complaint with us. And on that website that I said, dfs.my.gov, you can go to a complaint section, it's /complaints, or you'll navigate there and let us know what you're experiencing. Those complaints are helpful both because we might be able to resolve the issue you're dealing with, but also it's aggregate information for us to work with. And with that, see something, say something, also work with your elected officials. The more empowered you are, the greater your call for action is, right? And the more informed it is. So think about the various resources for change around you. So that, thank you again, Janeda, at My Money Workshop. I'll pause here and see if you have any questions or how you want to guide the conversation. But I do hope that after even this session and today, we can all keep this going as a conversation.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Winston, for sharing all that the Department of Financial Services is doing to protect our students. Can you talk a little bit about what parents should be doing, or sort of when should parents start looking at getting information about student loans and sort of accessing that information?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's a couple ways to think of it. When you should start thinking about it is when you start thinking about being parents, right? Immediately. There are college savings accounts. There are things you can do over the course of 18, 20 years to start saving in incremental ways to have a real substantial fund ready to support your children's education. So I don't, not to be glib, but like as soon as you can, right? Start thinking about it more concretely as your children are getting into high school, or if your children are going to be going to school later in life and you want to support them. Start educating yourself again about how do people even pay for school, right? What is a scholarship? What is a grant? What are grants that might have conditions and might convert into loans? Make sure that you understand all the different options available to you in any material or any conditions again related to that. And you can do that. A starting place is either going to DFS's website, like I mentioned, attending workshops that My Money Workshop puts on, any of these resources I think we've discussed today. But I'd also say very specifically, because this is a specific issue, in the private loan sphere, which is small in terms of dollar amount, but isn't going to have, it will have different solutions in the federal student loan space, right? Which Congress and the executive can deal with. Co-signers, right? So you might co-sign a loan for your child or for your grandchild so they can attend school. And I'm not saying don't be a co-signer. I'm just saying really understand what it means to co-sign a loan, because it can be, you are just liable for the loan. That's just what it means. And there are conditions where if you're the primary borrower makes a certain number of payments over a certain period of time, they can get you released from being a cosigner, right? They needed you to be the financial backstop, but the lender now feels comfortable with the primary borrower. Unfortunately, we see a lot of folks who the servicer or the lender, counts on-time payments differently than you would have assumed counting online payments for. If you make a lump sum of payments, they count that as one, not three, even if it equals 3 payments, et cetera. So just be sure you are wrapping your arms around what it really means to be a cosigner, and then be vigilant while you're a co-signer, and know the time period that during which payments need to be made before you can get released, and then apply for release as soon as possible. Unfortunately, we see people who are just stuck on someone's loan and they didn't plan financially to be on their loan, and then they find themselves obligated in a way that is very problematic for them.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I do want to open it up to, I know we have several educators on the panel. If you're interested in asking any questions, please raise your hand and I will I'll unmute you so that you can ask Winston. As we see if any of those come in, you mentioned briefly a little bit about Black and Brown women being sort of holding more of those loans. Can you talk a little bit about that? Just to sort of expand on what you were talking about.
Yeah, and I don't have the stats at my fingertips, so maybe I could pull them up as folks queue up for questions. But basically, we know, it's just a fact, we know looking at the numbers that Black students borrow more than white students. They borrow at a greater rate and they borrow greater dollar amounts than white students. We also know that upon graduation, relative to their white peers, Black students pay down their loans more slowly and they accumulate interest that actually grows. Like they owe more after 4 years from graduating than at the time of graduation, whereas white students typically owe less. They've been paying down. So we know that already for Black and Brown students at slightly different rates, but it's the same experience and phenomenon, that they borrow more and repayment's more difficult. There's a number of reasons why that may be. But what we also know is that this is compounded if you're a woman. And there's a couple of reasons here. And I think that, it's a little bit more complicated than it just sort of seems. But we know that Black women in particular disproportionately borrow more than other groups of borrowers and have that phenomenon of repaying. And I think there's a couple things going on here. And some of it is Black women have achieved high levels of education, right? So they if you go on to get a PhD or multiple masters, you are just probably going to have to borrow to pay for that. So just having the debt itself doesn't necessarily flag a problem, but I think when we see how the debt is handled going forward, a combination of gender wealth gap issues and servicing issues in the way that Black and Brown communities have been treated with student loan debt, Black women get that compounded effect of having a lot more debt and then really struggling to pay it down through these for access to funds to repay it, and issues with their servicers getting into the right plan, not understanding that if you get put into a forbearance, which sounds really good because you don't have to pay for a couple of months during a hardship, the interest accumulated there gets compounded and put inside your principal, and you start accruing interest on interest. And that if you ask for a deferment, or if your servicer told you that a deferment is an option that doesn't do that, that you wouldn't have that issue. So again, that's an example of a servicer issue, but it's also an example of a servicer issue that has led to growth in debt after graduation for certain communities over others. And the numbers are startling. I mean, there's some really great, I'm sorry, I don't have them at my fingertips, some great Brookings Institute and other studies just about, like, we're talking double-digit thousands of dollars in differences between Black and white borrowers who graduate at the same time, and just how their trajectory is so different.
Those are really very enlightening stats, and just very, I think it hits a lot home to me as a brown Latina college graduate. When I was paying back my loans, I thankfully had a lot of financial aid support, but the idea that my counterparts would be paying so much more for that education is really shocking. And just hearing you say that is really enlightening. And I hope that everyone on this call has a lot of food for thought, really, from everything that is available to parents, to students. Student loans, as you said, is sort of the third largest debt that Americans hold today. And I think it's imperative for us, as we continue to educate individuals in financial literacy, that we keep that in mind, that we keep that that knowledge that yes, financial literacy is important, and also we need to make sure that people are earning enough to cover payments on student loans or any debt that they have available to them. So Winston, thank you so much and for joining us today and sharing your insight. Everyone, please do check the DFF's website. It is just has a plethora of information for just not just borrowers, for anybody. I do see a question here in the chat. Are student loans still non-dischargeable in bankruptcy? Great question.
Yes, so it's a great question, and it's important to talk about. So this is a common misconception. It's not that student loans are non-dischargeable in bankruptcy, it's that they are treated differently than almost every other debt and have a higher burden. You have to prove that you would really suffer if they are not discharged. So they are dischargeable, it's just significantly harder to do, and the courts have handled it made it a lot harder than it really should be. Our office filed an amicus brief in a federal case last summer, making the case that student loan debts, they shouldn't be treated the way they're currently treated. So the short answer is they are still subject to a heightened discharge standard, which makes it very difficult. But what I will say is not all student loan debts. We think student loan debt very broadly, any debt you took out associated with going to school, but it's actually something called a qualified education loan is the type of student loan that is subject to the higher discharge. And folks should just definitely talk to a bankruptcy attorney if they're going to think about this, but not all student loan debt is subject to that. If you took out just a consumer loan to pay for things while you were in school, you might be able to discharge that in bankruptcy. If you took out a student loan to go to a school that's not properly accredited or doesn't receive federal financial assistance, that loan might not be subject to the heightened burden and might be dischargeable more readily in bankruptcy.
Great. Thank you so much. That's a great question. And thank you again, Winston. And that actually leads us right into our next panelist. And as I get them up ready here on the screen, I want to make sure that, if anybody does have questions, please do keep them coming. I will get John and Albert up on deck here. Great. Thank you both so much for joining us. This is our last session for the day, and I want to share that My Money Workshop and CompSci High have been working to bring a financial literacy program to their school, which they're going to talk about briefly. But it's just been a pleasure collaborating with both of them throughout this process. My Money Workshop, as I've said several times today, collaboration is the core of our of who we are. And as you heard from Naisha, we really are listening to our client partners so that we can provide the programming that's going to best resonate with their students, whether young or old. And so we're just so happy that we can highlight CompSci High today. With that, I'll leave it to both of you. John, I think you're leading this.
I am.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for having us. Good morning, everyone. Honored to be here. My name is John Campos. I am the Director of Partnerships for CompSci High. CompSci High was opened 3 years ago. I am a founding member, and previous to that, I had worked in the nonprofit space for several years, and before that, I actually worked in the business world running business service contracts for Fortune 500 companies. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because I have been in different spaces that our outlook on finance in the high school space is a little bit different than other schools, and we're going to be talking a little bit about that. I also want to take this as an opportunity to introduce Albert Paez.
Hi, everybody. Again, thanks for having us today. As John mentioned, my name is Albert Paez. I serve as our partnerships manager here in the post-secondary learning department with John. Prior to joining CompSci High last year, I worked for many years as a social studies teacher in multiple schools across New York City and Westchester. And I also have a background in educational policy. So we're going to start off today with a little explanation about what John and I do in the post-secondary learning department before we explore and share out our partnership with the great folks at My Money Workshop. Off you go, John.
Great. So as we start looking at CompSci High and the post-secondary learning program, I think it's important to provide a little bit of context for why we are doing what we're doing. And if we look at the school model, going back to the school model, it is a three-legged stool for the strategic planning of our school. The first one is academics, and every school is going to tell you the same thing, that they are focused on academics. We are no different. The second part of our school is the computer science aspect of our school. Computer science is is a requirement for all 4 years. And upon graduation, our goal is to have every student graduate with some type of basic certification in computer science and technology, okay? And then the third thing, and this comes specifically to what we do, the third thing is that we want every student to come out prepared for the workforce. And this is the whole basis for the creation of the post-secondary learning program. Oftentimes you'll find in schools that the model is geared around college readiness, college preparedness, and a lot of funding goes towards that. And then you will get some funding that goes to something that's called work-based learning. And then within that, there's even a smaller amount that gets dedicated towards financial literacy or financial curriculum. So we wanted to give you the basis of that so that you can understand how we're reviewing the school before the doors even open, and then going down to the purpose of the post-secondary learning program specifically. And so when we look at the purpose of the post-secondary learning program, we actually view it as income inequality and social justice, which we think is a little bit unique in that other schools tend to view post-secondary learning, again, through a work-based learning lens of we need to teach basic skills to students and then work from there. And we're actually the opposite. And we look at it as everything that we're doing is to prepare students so that we have students that are aware of income inequality and social justice, can speak to the income inequality and social justice, and then tie in the skills that they're developing and that the careers that they're researching into helping them and their families address income inequality and social justice. So that's the basis of how we look at everything. And in doing so, we then jump off and start to prepare our students starting in 9th grade all the way through 12th grade with a basic foundational skill set that we know is out there in the workforce, that the workforce, a number of studies continually show that the workforce is looking for a particular set of skills. And so everything that we do is around developing those set of skills. It's not just creating a resume, right? And it's not just checking a box off of these types of requirements, but it's actually getting students involved so that if we ask one of our CompSci High students, what's the purpose of a resume? They will tell you simply to get an interview. That's it. That's simple, right? And so taking them through the process so that they're in control and understand each step of the way and how it ties all in together, okay? Our overall goal for the post-secondary learning program, both from a career aspect and a college aspect, is that we want our students, by the time they're 24 years old, to be earning double the current median annual income in the 15th Congressional District, which is where Comp Sci High is located. We think that's an achievable goal if we're able to do everything that we set out to do. And if we do that, we think we have a chance for our students and their families to begin to break out through the cycle of poverty.
And so what it looks like on a day-to-day basis for our post-secondary learning program at Comp Sci High is detailed on the slide that's on the board now. John and I have built together a 4-year sequence curriculum that builds on foundational skills in the 9th and 10th grade, things like mock interviews, resume building, eye contact, professional emails. And we've really tried to identify skills that John mentioned before are in high demand and that will correlate to higher starting salaries for our students as well. Students also work with us in the post-secondary learning program on an individualized career plan, which we are in the process of making a digital portfolio. So students leave us not only with an actionable plan that they can put in place when they graduate Comp Sci High, but also a work product that they can demonstrate, a portfolio of their work and their skills to future colleges and future employers. And of course, John mentioned early on in that first slide, our work with income inequality and social justice. We think it's really important that before kids go out and think about the wealth and accomplishments that they might achieve after Comp Sci High, we want them to have a deeper historical context of why the world looks the way it does. Specifically, why does the South Bronx look the way it does, before they can go out and radically transform the economic trajectories of not only themselves, but their families and their communities. And we support that curriculum with really fun, exciting activities for our students, things like mock interviews. We just wrapped up a mock interview session last Friday with about 30 professionals from Verizon. And we think those opportunities and those experiences provide students a chance to interact with professionals, to network, and to experiment and do some trial and error of how to interact with the professional world in the safe space of their high school. And finally, I'll highlight one more thing that we do in our post-secondary learning department. Those are our design competitions, which are 1 to 2 week long design sprints where students work collaboratively with each other on a design challenge that they've been presented. And so a previous example was working with Google on ed tech solutions, and students work collaboratively over the course of 2 weeks to design and pitch a product to a set of professionals. And so students not only are learning in the classroom, but they're putting their skills into practice, interacting with adults. And we really think that's one of the things that sets our students apart at Comp Sci High. I think before we talk about what we do from a financial literacy aspect, the one thing John and I did want to share with everybody today is our summer internship program as well, because we think the two are definitely connected. We see our summer internship program as a way for students to prepare for the work world, build their professional network while also gaining some really valuable skills. And so our summer internship program is a required part of the academic programming at Comp Sci High. Students are expected to apply to 5 summer internship programs, including the city's SYEP, the Summer Youth Employment Program. And our goal, John and I, every summer is to place 100% of academically eligible students into a paid internship opportunity. We know that's a lofty goal, but it's built into our school model. And so far, we've had some great success in our summer internship programs. We know, again, that summer internships lead to higher starting salaries. They allow kids to explore different career options. They gain real world work experience. And again, they're introducing students to different types of careers and professionals. Before we delve into our financial literacy, we did want to share some data from our previous experience with summer internships last summer. And in the midst of COVID-19, a challenging summer, we were still able to place about 86% of our students in paid internship opportunities last year. We had about 174 different opportunities for students. And so some students participated in 2 internships last summer. And some of these numbers here, I think, reflect the strength of our program and also the strength of our students. And we've started to tell the students that when you look at some of these numbers, we want to see improvement heading into this summer. We want to see students make a deeper connection between what they do in their summer internships and what they're learning in school. We want students to understand the impact of their work on the South Bronx community a little deeper as well. And so as we pivot in our curriculum and think about summer internships, My Money Workshop has been influential to our program, thinking about how students can think about their paychecks, how students can prepare to budget the money they were going to receive during their summer internships. And all that is part of the financial literacy work that we've done with My Money Workshop. I think when we've worked with My Money Workshop, one of the great pieces of our partnership has been this long-term planning approach that we've developed. And that is because we know this is going to be a program, we know this is a curriculum that we're going to look to build out over the course of our 4-year sequence. And so with that comes the foundational skills in 9th and 10th grade. And then we're going to look to support that in our 11th and 12th grade curriculums, where we actually have built a wealth creation pathway for students. In 11th grade, students get to choose between 2 wealth creation pathways. They choose between learning about stock investments, and the other option for students is real estate investment. So that is the idea of like the foundational piece of building wealth, transforming the economic conditions and context of your family and your community. And we really think that the work that they're going to get in 9th and 10th grade from My Money Workshop, things like setting financial goals, building credit, learning about budgeting, that is really going to be at the heart of what they can build on in 11th and 12th grade. And so we're really excited to see where this curriculum goes over the span of our 4 years. And now I'll wrap up with our partnership and what we've done with My Money Workshop. We have been working together for this entire school year now at this point. And I will say this about working with the organization, Janeda, Marisol, they have been the quintessential definition of partners in what has been a very challenging school year. Between remote, in person, changing our schedule what seems like 5 or 6 times, My Money Workshop has been with us side by side, still committed and still thinking about how we can deliver this very important programming to students. So Janeda and Marisol, they've put together for us a 6-lesson sequence, which is going to be rolled out in our 9th and 10th grade curriculum, which provides actionable steps and empowers students to really think about their financial futures and explore what they already might know about money and how to build on that. I think in our 9th and 10th grade, we've developed a really, really specified and unique program, which includes topics like financial goal settings, expenses tracking, budget management, credit cards, identity theft, banking, and savings. I don't know many 9th graders who learn about identity theft at other schools. What we see as a strength of this partnership as well is that we have the opportunity to bring content experts into the class. John and I are by no means financial literacy experts, but we think there is a great value of bringing the My Money Workshop facilitators into our classroom and not only building those connections with our students, but acting as the experts in their field. And so again, that gives our students an opportunity to connect with professionals. It gives them a deeper, a richer content experience. And more importantly, kids love when visitors come into the school. They get tired of John and I after a while. So when we have new folks coming in, that's always an exciting thing. Building on that, My Money Workshop has proposed, and we're in the middle of building out some sort of mentor component with this financial literacy program, how maybe when students are working in the summer, they can have check-ins with the financial literacy experts or facilitators. And those check-ins might, be more professional in nature of what are you doing in your summer internship. But I definitely hope that finance and what you do with your summer internship paycheck is a part of that conversation. And finally, One of the key pieces of this relationship has been the connection between our families and My Money Workshop. One of the really important pieces of our discussion over the course of the year is how do we get this conversation about finance and financial literacy to our families? And we've already started that process. Last month, we had a financial literacy town hall with our parents. And we know that's just the beginning of an important conversation that we want to see parents again in the summer. We want to see them again in the fall. But what we are really trying to do is empower parents and prepare parents to have financial conversations with their students. Because we know these conversations can be stressful. We know these conversations can be new to parents. There might be cultural and different experiences that create barriers to having these conversations with our families. And we want to make sure that we could address those. And so we know that getting to our families, including them in this conversation, has been really an exciting part of this partnership, and one that My Money has been really important to help facilitate as well. And so that's what we're doing at CompSci High. John, I kick it back to you if you have anything to add about what we're working on.
Yes, actually, that's great, Albert. I think we touched on a lot of the main points. A couple of things that I do want to bring up, though, as we're talking about, as I think about it, this idea of personal finance education, right? It's not so much literacy. I don't view it as literacy, because when you start to view it as literacy, it starts to get broken up into pieces and segmented right away. For us, we know what we're looking at here on the slide is crucial, but we also know that starting for our ninth graders next year, we also have part of their introduction to ninth grade that we are having one unit that's called the philosophy and psychology of money. And you have to be able to talk with students about these a little bit more esoteric topics and break it down for them to think about so that they understand how everything is connected together, right? We're swimming upstream with students, with youth in general, right? Against images in social media. You know, and if you think about it and think about music videos and you think about all these things about how money is portrayed or how wealth is portrayed, we know this. And so unless we get ahead of these things and have those conversations about, hey, what does money represent to you? How do you, not your family, how do you think about money? Those kinds of things, and giving them space to actually stop and pause and think about it and then express that. And then hear themselves and other students thinking about that and asking each other if that's right or if that's wrong. Does that sound correct? Does that sound off? Once we present it in those terms, then we know we have two sides of the coin working together. I'll give you another example. Albert brought up the wealth creation piece that we roll out in 11th and 12th grade for our students. Crucial, okay? But the other side of that coin is we also roll out in 11th and 12th grade specifically, income inequality and social justice units that follow right behind those units being presented in wealth creation. And we do that intentionally so that students understand it's not about creating wealth. I'm going to get mine and I'm gone, but rather it's, okay, I understand about wealth creation. And now how is income inequality and social justice playing out in my neighborhood? And what can I do with both of those? And how can I help my community? How can I help my family work with this? And so it's an important conversation, because if we're talking about personal finance, right, and this knowledge base that we're trying to give to students, we have to be able to talk about the deeper subjects and give students the contextual understanding instead of just showing them, hey, this is how you set up, this is how you open a bank account. This is how you set up direct deposit. Those are crucial, yes, but if they don't have context, we're missing out on how to move the needle for our students to that next level of breaking the cycle of poverty.
Thank you both so much for sharing that. I think that, John, you touching on that is so key, particularly because I think that one of the things that we teach in our classes is defeatist thoughts. And what do defeatist thoughts have to do with financial management? Well, we know that we learn our financial behaviors from our parents, colleagues, other family members, and we internalize those and then continue on into our adult lives making, perhaps not the best, choices if we didn't have those good choices to begin with. And I think that that's one of the key pieces with this program and all of our other programs is that we are choosing to bring parents into the conversation, to bring families together to have these conversations, and as several other people mentioned today, to not make money a taboo subject. So I want to thank you both so much for sharing your insight. We are very excited to work with your students as we continue to manage through these COVID times. I do want to again give you all big ups for dealing with all of this difficulty with such amazing positivity and encouragement and excitement for your students. I know that they're all getting the best of you from you all. Thank you, Albert. Albert has put in his information in there, both his and John's information in the chat. Please do reach out and learn more about what CompSci High is doing for their students. I think that this is a really great model for other schools in the country. Only 21 states in the country require financial education in their schools, and there's no set standard for what that education should look like. So as we look at this model and others, I do want to encourage everyone to really think about, again, as I said early this morning, about the awareness that we're bringing to this issue. John, Albert, before we end, or before I bring in Rob, is there any last thoughts that you want to share?
No, just thank you for having us, and happy to report back next year at our next conference of what it looks like with our students.
Yes, exactly. Thank you both so much. And with that, we'll bring in Rob Yaffa, one of our board co-presidents, to give a last thank you.
Hi.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, 1 second, Rob.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. What a really special morning to listen to so many wonderful people and to see so many great faces on Zoom, to experience our first financial literacy forum, one of many in the future. I was moved and thoroughly impressed by today's speakers, and I hope that those who were able to be on today and watching on video got as much out of it as I did today. I want to really thank Janeda, Marisol, and Sweta for all of their time and hard effort to put this amazing event together. Those who have done these sorts of things or participated know how long it takes and how many hours, how many phone calls, how many emails, follow up, and content. This just did not happen over last weekend. You can see how much time and effort that My Money Workshop put into this event. So on behalf of the board, I would like to thank those three people for an incredible, incredible job. Of course, we couldn't do it without our great sponsor, JPMorgan Chase, who has committed to helping My Money Workshop grow our mission along with other corporate partners. As I look back at what we've achieved so far, I'm excited for what lies ahead for My Money Workshop. And again, I want to thank our donors and supporters and our community members for their investment in our mission. Please join us in ensuring that our youth and adult receive the education they need to achieve economic success. There are many ways that you can help us. Please make My Money Workshop and financial literacy your mission. Become a financial literacy ambassador. Please share our messages online and connect us to your children's schools, your community houses, your places of worship, anywhere you think that we can get our message out and help people. And we also ask you to encourage our friends to get involved. Lastly, I would ask you to please support our mission by texting the code Brighter Future to 44-312. And that's Brighter Future, all one word, to 44-321. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. We greatly appreciate your time. And the panelists were marvelous. And thank you again.
Thank you so much, Rob. And I echo Rob in thanking everyone on our panel. You all have made this morning an amazing morning. I'm sitting here smiling from ear to ear. This could not have turned out better. And as several people already said, here's to the next one. I look forward to connecting with you all offline. If you have any questions about today's speakers, the forum, anything and how you can help, please do reach out to My Money Workshop. We're here to help and we're here to forward the financial literacy message. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.
There's still a few on. I'll help here.
You guys were.
Thank you. I don't know who that was.
Oh, I think that was Sonia. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Awesome. I'll end the call and then I'll thank you everybody who's watching on YouTube. Please follow us. Thank you. Hit the subscribe button.